We begin today at the Gemara towards the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Beis at the Mishnah. Continue the halachas of Pigul regarding the Korban Mincha. Zok the Mishnah, Lechol kechatzi zayis. If the machshava of Pigul, while he's doing the Aveda of the Mincha, let's say taking the kaimitz, and the machshava was that a half a kazayis he will eat after its time, or lahakter kechatzi zayis, and to burn a half a kazayis out of its time. And so, as we saw before, the halacha of Pigul applies to both the achila of a Adam and the achila of a mizbeach. So over here, the machshava of Pigul has to be at least a kazayis. So do we combine this machshava of Pigul, where half of it is for the achila of the Adam and the other half of it is the haktara of what's burnt in the mizbeach? So in this case, kosher. The two aspects of this thought is not combined, and it's kosher because she'ein achila v'haktara mitztarfin. The two different kinds of achilas, since they're not the same, they're different in nature, so they do not combine to make it Pigul. So now it can be medayik from the Mishnah as follows. The reason why I say that it doesn't combine, the lechol ula haktir, because it's different kinds of achilas. One is the person eating, the kain eating, and one is the mizbeach eating, to burn on the mizbeach. So therefore these two don't combine. But lechol v'lechol, but if the thought of Pigul is two kinds of achilas, and that's even a davar she'ein darke lechol. When you're thinking, I'm going to eat from the mincha, and that part that you eat, which is the shirayim, and I'm also going to eat another half a kazayas of the kaimitz, which you burn in the mizbeach, and I'm going to eat that out of its time. So this is a davar she'ein darke lechol, not something that a person usually eats. It goes on the mizbeach, mitzdaref. So from our Mishnah, it could be medayik that this would combine to make it Pigul. So the question of this is, how could this be? But vakatani reisha, and the Mishnah before on Omer Aleph here, the Mishnah said, lechol davar she'darke lechol. Lahakter davar she'darke lahakter. If the thought of Pigul to eat out of its time, regarding eating, that's only the shirayim, which is intended for eating. Or regarding burning on the mizbeach, the kaimitz, that's something that's intended to be burnt on the mizbeach. So davar she'darke lechol in. So from the Mishnah before, I see that the machshava of Pigul has an effect only if this is something that the derech is to eat it. She'ein darke lechol. But if it's something that it's not the derech to eat, then your machshava of Pigul will not have an effect. So that's a contradiction to what we were just medayik here in this Mishnah. That's the Gemara, man Tana, who's the Tana of our Mishnah here? He argues, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Hamani Rabbi Eliezer. The Tana of this Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer that disagrees with this rule, and he says the Amar Machashvin Machilas Adam Machilas Mizbeach, that the machshava of Pigul, when you're thinking about something that's intended for a person to eat, the shirayim of the mincha, and you're thinking that you're going to burn that on the mizbeach out of its time, or the opposite, machilas mizbeach, achilas adam, that you have the kaimitz, which is intended to be burnt on the mizbeach, and the person is thinking that he's going to eat it out of its time, that machshav of Pigul is effective. Tanam, as it says in the Mishnah later in the Masechta here, that what did Rabbi Eliezer say? A kaimitz is a mincha, lechel, davar she'ein darke lechel. He does the kmitza of the mincha, and the thought of Pigul it was to eat something that's not the derech to eat out of its time. Or lahakter, davar she'ein darke lahakter, or to burn something, the mizbeach, that's not supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach, and to do that out of its time, kosher. So the Tanakama says that it's kosher. And that's like the Mishnah before here on Amar Aleph. But the Rabbi Eliezer Paisel, Rabbi Eliezer says, although it's not the derech, but it's still a machshava of Pigul to eat out of its time, and it will passel. And that's the Tana of our Mishnah.
It's kosher for what? Or passel for what?
For the carbon itself. Carbon. Abaya Omar, however, Abaya says that we don't have to say that the Mishnah before is the Tanakama and the Rabbanon, and our Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer that argues. Abaya says, Afilatayim Rabbanon. Our Mishnah here could also be Rabbanon's opinion. Because in the Mishnah here, it didn't say this clearly. We had a diuk in the Mishnah. So the Gemara Nara, Abaya will explain, you don't have to be medayik from the Mishnah this way. Loi, don't be medayik as we were before. So again, our Mishnah said that the machshava of Pigul was half a kazayis of achila, half a kazayis of haktara. So there are two different types, so they don't combine. So now, what are you medayik from the Mishnah? So the Gemara says, Loi, don't be medayik from the Mishnah like we said before. That halechel v'lechel davar she'ein darke lechel, that if it's two things to eat, your machshava was both to eat, but it's also including to eat a part of the mincha that it's not the derech to eat, that it'll be Pigul, that's not the diuk. Rather be medayik from a Mishnah that whole lechel, velechel, davish, darke lechel, that if you have two machshavas of pigul to eat, and they're both things that is intended for eating, then the pigul will take effect. But not in a case where it's not the derech, like the Tanakama, like the Mishnah before, and like the opinion of the Rabbanon. Okay, so now the Gemara asks on this though. If so, what is the chiddush of the Mishnah here? My kamash malon. But then, what is the chiddush of the Mishnah here? Behed yikatani law. This point that if there's two parts of the machshava that you could combine, as long as they're both a machshava regarding something which is intended for eating, so that it says clearly in the Mishnah before and Amar Aleph. The Mishnah says, Lechel kezayis bachotz or kezayis lamacha. If there were two different thoughts, one was to eat out of its place, and the other is to eat out of its time. One kezayis and another kezayis, or kezayis the opposite, kezayis lamacha or kezayis bachotz. First the thought was to eat a kezayis out of its time, the other is then afterwards out of its place. Or if it was kechatzi zayis bachotz, kechatzi zayis lamacha, or kechatzi zayis lamacha, kechatzi zayis bachotz. In all of these cases, the machshava will passel the carbon, and it's passel. But ve'ein by kares, there won't be any kares since you're mixing in another machshava together with the pigul. It's not just a machshava of pigul, which means a machshava shaloi bizmanoi, but it's also a machshava of shaloi b'mkaimai. But the point is, we clearly see it. The Mishnah is telling you the halacha that even though it's two different thoughts, and each thought is only a half a kezayis, but as long as it's two parts of achila, that it's the derech to eat, it combines to passel the carbon. So the diuk of our Mishnah to say that in our Mishnah we're being medayik this very halacha that it already said in the Mishnah before, what's the chiddush? Hasu lamali. So what are we learning out of here from our Mishnah more that we didn't see in the Mishnah before? Okay, so now here the Gemara actually goes back to the point that it said before. Now, if you're going to go back to the original pshat that we wanted to say, that you could be medayik from our Mishnah, that you could combine two machshavas and achila for pigul, even if there's a part of your machshava to eat something which it's not the derech to eat, and kamash malonim mitzdaref, and our Mishnah is saying that could be combined to passel or to make pigul, but that can't be, as we already pointed out before, mireisha shamit mina, from the reisha of the Mishnah, we see that does not combine. And Abaye does not want to say that the Mishnah here is a different opinion. So that's not that's not what our Mishnah is saying. Now, if you're going to say, you know what, forget about the diyukum of the Mishnah. Let's look at the actual halacha, what the Mishnah itself is saying. Our question is, what is this Mishnah adding that we didn't know from the Mishnah before? So, till now we're discussing the diyukum of the Mishnah. What's the actual halacha of the Mishnah itself? Lecha lula hakter, to tell me the halacha that if part of your machshava of pigul was to eat and the other part of the machshava was to burn the mizbeach, they don't combine. The higuva kamashmala, maybe this itself is the chiddush of a Mishnah without any diyukim of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no, but this I already know from the Mishnah before, and Daf Yud Beis Amar Aleph, midiyuke dereisha shamet. I would understand that from the diyuk of the Mishnah before. Why? So now, the truth is, it does not say this clearly in the Mishnah before, but the Gemara says it would seem that from a diuk of the Mishnah before, or from the halacha of the Mishnah before, I would understand already this halacha as well. Why? Because what did it say in the Mishnah before? The hashta, now from the Mishnah before it said, Ma lechel v'lechel dovish ein darke lechel omrit loy mitzdaref. If you have in your machshava of pigul two parts of achila, and they're not going to combine. Why? Because one is intended for eating and the other is not intended for eating. But they're both machshavas related to achila. Elamai, it wasn't a derech. So that does not combine. So if so, if you're in your machshava of pigul, there were two parts. One is to eat and one is to burn the mizbeach. So it's b'chlal not two in the same category of achila. One is the achila of a person and the other is the aktar on the mizbeach. So mibayes is needless to say that it will not combine. So why is our Mishnah teaching us a halacha here? So therefore, it's difficult to say that the point of our Mishnah is just to say this halacha itself of not combining achila and aktara. That's why up until this point in the Gemara, it was thinking that the chiddush must be the diuk of this Mishnah here. Okay, but the Gemara says, no, we do need to say the halacha of our Mishnah that the two parts of a machshava of pigul, achila and aktara, don't combine. I cannot learn it out from the Mishnah before. Lechel v'lahakter itzrichele. It is necessary to teach me that it will not combine. I had already said before that when you have two machshavas of achila, They don't combine because one is the derech and one is not the derech. And we would say a kavachaymer, if it's achila and aktara, it's two completely different things. For sure, it should not combine. So the Gemara says no, because salkadai techamine. If it would not say our Mishnah, I would think to say samuduloi ki orchei kemachashev, because over there in the case where he's thinking about two different things of achila. But the point is, he's thinking to eat something which is not the derech. It's not intended for eating. That's why it doesn't combine. So even though it's both achila, but it's not the derech. Over here, true achila and aktara are two different things altogether, but nevertheless they're both orche. This is the way it's intended to eat. This is intended to be burnt on the mizbeach. So maybe as long as it's orche, if it's the way your machshava is related to what is supposed to be done with it, maybe that would combine. So emel it's tarif. Mashmalan, therefore, our Mishnah does have to say for the halacha of the Mishnah itself, not for any diyukim of our Mishnah, but for this halacha itself, that the two parts of a machshava in pigul, achila and aktare, will not combine. Adron Allah kol Menachos. We shall return to you the first perek of Masechta Menachos. Okay, continuing to the second perek, the Mishnah, and here the first Mishnah opens with the halachas continuing regarding machshavas of pigul in a mincha. The person is taking the kaimitz of the mincha, and the machshav of pigul is that he's going to eat the shirayim, the flour, the other flour of the mincha, or then this kaimitz that he just took from the mincha, he's going to do it when lamachar, out of its time tomorrow. So in such a case, Rabbi Yosi would agree, bazeh shu pigul, that this will be pigul, and the chayav olav kares, and if you eat from it, you chayav kares. Now, however, if the case is as follows, he's taking the kaimitz of the mincha, and his thought of pigul is that the levaina, the frankincense that there's on this mincha, that also has to be burnt on the mizbeach. There are two parts that are burnt on the mizbeach: the kaimitz of the flour that you remove, and then the levaina. They're separately burnt on the mizbeach, and only after you burn both of them is it matter to eat from the shirayim, the leftover flour. So over here, the thought of pigul was that he was removing the kaimitz, and while he's doing this avodah to remove the kaimitz, he's thinking that the levaina, the other part that's supposed to be burnt on the mizbeach, he's going to do it tomorrow, lamachar. So in this case, Rabbi Yosi Omer, Pasal, Rabbi Yosi says it's going to be possible, but ve'im by kares, the halacha of pigul will not take effect. However, Chachamim say pigul v'chayav and olav kares. This will be pigul, and you will be chayav kares on this. And we'll see in the Gemara the explanation of the machlokes here. Why would Rabbi Yosi in this case say that it's not pigul? So now Amrullah, the Chachamim ask Rabbi Yosi, why are you saying that if by the kaimitz you have a machshava for the levaina, for burning the levaina, that would not be pigul? Why would this be any different than a machshava of pigul when you bring a carbon, a behemoth? What happens when you bring a carbon? You're shechting the carbon, and you're thinking that you're going to spray the blood out of its time, or you're going to burn the carbon out of its time. Same thing here. He's taking the kaimitz, or similar thing. You're taking the kaimitz, and the kain is thinking that he's going to burn the levaina out of its time. Why shouldn't the pigul take effect? On the other hand, so Rabbi Yosi answers, Shahazevach, when it comes to a carbon, by Behemet, Damai, Ubisaroi, Ve'emura, of the blood, the meat, and the sacrificial parts, Echot. It's all considered to be one thing. It's one animal, one carbon, one body. But Ulevaina, Einamena Mincha. However, the frankincense is considered to be a separate thing. It's not part of the Mincha itself, and therefore when you do the kaimitz, and your machshava of pigul is in relation to the levaina, here it will be possible, but the halacha of pigul will not take effect. So the Gemara starts with the first case of the Mishnah. Why did the Mishnah have to open and say that Rabbi Yosi agrees in the first case when you take the kaimitz and you're thinking to eat the shirayim out of its time or to burn the kaimitz out of its time, that there Rabbi Yosi agrees that the pigul will take effect. Why does it have to say that? That seems to be obvious. Says the Gemara, Mishum the Kabbalah Misni Seifer, it's not obvious, but because it says in the Seifer that in the case where he's removing the kaimitz, and then the machshava is lahakte levinasa lamachar, that he's going to burn the levaina tomorrow. So over here, Rabbi Yosi pasal ve'ein by kares. Rabbi Yosi says that the pigul it will be pasal, but it will not be pigul. So since Rabbi Yosi says that in that case, so ma'od teimeh, I would think to say that the reasoning of Rabbi Yosi that it's not pigul in the sefer should apply in the regular case that it brings in the reisha. Why? Because the Mao the time I would think to say time with Rabbi Yosi. The reason why Rabbi Yosi says it's not pigul is mishum de kasavar ein mefaglin b'chatzi mater, that the din of pigul will not take effect if it's only with a chatzi mater, which means that a person is thinking that he's going to do an avodah which is only half of the matter. As I mentioned, benigay to the carbon mincha, in order to be matter, to eat from the shirayim, there's two things you have to do. You have to burn the kaimitz and you have to burn the levaina. So over here, in the Reish of the Mishnah as well, when he's burning the kaim, or when he's taking the kaimitz, that is, when he's taking the kaimitz, his machshava of pigul is that he's going to be makter the kaimitz tomorrow. But to be makter the kaimitz tomorrow is only a half of the matter. Maybe pigul would only be when he's taking the kaimitz, he's thinking that he's going to burn the kaimitz and the levaina tomorrow. Now you have both that are matter, then the pigul will take effect. If his machshava is only regarding the kaimitz, that's a half of the matter. So maybe the pigul shouldn't take effect, and therefore in the case of the reisha, as I just described, it should not be pigul. So kamash malan. So therefore, the Tana opens and explains that the Bahamayde. In this case, Rabbi Yosi is made that it will be pigul because that is not the explanation for Rabbi Yosi's opinion. This idea of ein mefaglim b'chatzi mater is not the basis of what Rabbi Yosi says. It doesn't apply here b'chlal, and there's a different reason for Rabbi Yosi's opinion, as the Gemara will explain right here in the continuation. Okay, so now what is the explanation of Rabbi Yosi's opinion? Lahakter levainosa lemachar. So when a person, when the kain takes the kaimitz, and he thinks that he's going to be makter the levaina tomorrow, so Rabbi Yosi says, "Pasal ve'en by kares," it'll be pasal, but it's no kares, there's no pigul. What's taka the reason of Rabbi Yosi? So as we just said, the reason is not because the levaina is a chatzi mater. The levaina should be together with the kaimitz. You burn both of them. So the thing is that it's only a chatzi mater. So then, what is the reason of Rabbi Yosi? Amar Rabbi Shlakish says the rule of Rabbi Yosi is as follows. Rabbi Yosi would say, "Ein mater mefageles mater," that when you have two different parts in this carbon mincha, and they're both mater to eat from the shirayim, the kaimitz and the levaina, and when you're thought of pigul, when you're doing the avodah of one mater, which is taking the kaimitz, is regarding the levaina, which is another mater to allow to eat from the shirayim, the pigul does not take effect. It's two different things that are matter that are disconnected from each other, and therefore the machshava of one for the other will not be pigul. So as you see here, the point is not that the levaina is a chatzi mater. That's not the point. The point is that these are two distinct matirim, and therefore the machshava on one mater does not affect the other one to create the status of pigul. And he brings another example. The same thing will also be b'shnei b'zichi levaina shalechem apanim. By the lechem apanim, so there are the two spoons with the frankincense that you're going to burn on the mizbeach. She'ein mater mefageles mater. So if when he is burning one, he's thinking that the other spoon I'm going to burn tomorrow. So these two different bezichim of the levaina are two different matirim. They're separate, and when you burn one and you have a machshava to burn the other one out of its time, it's not going to create a status of pigul. That's the way Rashi explains this. Other Rishonim explain it a little bit differently. When he's removing one of the spoons, one of the bezichim from the shulchan, and then he has a machshava that he's going to burn the other spoon out of its time tomorrow, then the pigul will not take effect. Right? But Rashi, as I mentioned, says that when he's burning one, and he's thinking that he's not going to burn the other one tomorrow, it will not take effect. It's two distinct parts of the matter, and one will not affect the other to create the status of pigul. Oh, no, sorry, I missed the word. So the Gemara asks in this, why are we giving another example, b'nigeya, to the lechem apanim? When you have these two bezichim, it seems to be the same idea. Just like by a carbon mincha, you have the kaimitz and you have the levaina. By the lechem apanim, you have the two bezichim. It's understood that the same idea should apply. So the Gemara explains, no, there's a added chiddush here, because ma'ad the otherwise I would think to say, you know why Rabbi Yosi says that if you're doing the kaimitz and you're having a machshava of pigul regarding the levaina, so that machshava will not take effect. You know why? I would think maybe the reason is mishum delav mina the minchahi. The levaina is considered to be separate and distinct because it's not of the same type as the mincha. It's not flour. It's frankincense. That's why the machshava of the when you take the kaimitz of the flour and your machshava is regarding the levaina, which is a different min, it doesn't take effect. But when it comes to the 2 spoons of the levaina, which it's the same min, again, the min and the hadodin, they're the exact same min. So over here, I would say, even though it's 2 different position, but maybe since it's the same min, the machshava of pigul by one for on the other, maybe it would take effect, then it would create pigul. So therefore, he comes and says that no, that each one of these 2 levainas are not dependent one on another. There's a separate mitzvah. You can be makter each one separately. They're not contingent on each other. Which one of these 2 bezichen are you makter first? Whichever one you want. You can be makter one, you can be makter the other. So therefore, they're not connected to each other. They're considered to be separate. And therefore, if you have the machshava of pigul on one, when you're being makter the other, the pigul will not take effect.
Is that because it's levoina?
Because it's
levoina.
No, not necessarily. It's the point that there are 2 separate parts of the matter that are not dependent on one another. The Gemara will explain it, as we'll see. Okay, but now the Gemara actually asks, if we go now back to the language in the Mishnah before, there was a conversation between Rabbi Yossi and Chachamim about this. And it seems actually that the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi is this point that we just negated. That the reason the pigul doesn't take effect is because the levaina is a different min. Could you actually say that time that Rabbi Yossi b'levaina lav mishum de lav mina de minchi? The reason of Rabbi Yossi why, when he has the machshava of pigul for the levaina, that it will not take effect, it's not because the levaina is a different min. That's not the point. How could you say that? Well, Katani Seif in the end of the Mishnah it says, Omru loy, the Chachamim ask Rabbi Yossi, you're saying when you have the machshav on levaina, there's no pigul, but ma shinso min hazevach. Why is this any different from a carbon where you're shechting and you're having a machshav in the another part of the carbon to burn on the mizbeach, and there the pigul takes effect? And Amalehen, what does Rabbi Yossi answer? Hazevach, when it comes to a carbon, domoy psare ve'murav echad. All the parts of the carbon, the blood, the meat, and the sacrificial parts is all considered to be one. It's the same min. It's part of the same animal. But a levaina, but the levaina is not the same min of the mincha. This is flour, this is frankincense, and therefore over here, a machshava of pigul and the kaimitz and the flour for the frankincense to burn it out of its time, it's a different min. Therefore, it will not take effect. So you clearly see in the reasoning that Rabbi Yossi is giving that the point is that it's a different min. So that won't apply by the lechem apanim where you have the 2 bezichim but they're the same min. So the Gemara explains, no, that's not the way we understand what Rabbi Yossi's response was. What was the Rabbi Yossi saying when he said these words, Einem and Mincha? Really the point is, like we said before, that you have the 2 parts of the mincha, the kaimetz and the levaina, and because each one is burnt on the mizbeach separately, and they're not dependent on one another, that's why it doesn't take effect. And it's similar by the 2 bezichin. So how does it fit into the words of what Rabbi Yossi was saying? What he was saying, that it's not part of the mincha, he meant to say, not in the physically, that this is levaina and this is flour, but eino be'ikuv mincha. It's not something which is held up by the kaimetz of the mincha. The lav ki heichid ma'akiv lohu kaimetz l'shirayim. It's not like the kaimetz and the shirayim. How does it work with the kaimetz and the shirayim? You can't eat from the shirayim until you bring the kaimetz. The kamo, the lav miskater, if you did not burn yet the kaimetz, if you didn't burn the kaimetz yet, loy misachli shirayim. You can't burn the shirayim. So hachanami, so you would think to say that maybe over here would be similar, ma'akiv lo l'levaina, that until you don't burn the kaimetz, you can't burn the levaina. But that's not true, though. If that would be the case, that you just take 2 different things, there's the kaimitz and the levaina, but you can't burn the levaina until you burn the kaimitz. So then it's not shnei matirim, it's not 2 different matirim. They're dependent on another. And then if you would have the machshava of pigul, when you burn the kaimitz for the levaina, it would affect the pigul. Because the levaina is dependent on the kaimitz. You can't be makta the levaina until you're makta the kaimitz. But that's not the case. Al elo, what's the halacha? By the kaimitz and the levaina, iboy hai makta bereisha, viboy hai makta bereisha. You have to burn them both. They're both matirim to then be allowed to eat from the shirayim. But there's no order. You can be makta each one separately, whichever one you want first. So therefore, these are 2 separate matirim that are not dependent one on another. So if you have the machshava of pigul from one on the other, it will not affect it. In contrast, by the animal, it doesn't work that way. By the animal, you spray the blood in order then to be allowed to burn on the mizbeach, and then to eat. They're connected to each other. It's all part of one animal that goes together. So here, this is unique that the levaina and the kaimitz, they're 2 separate things that you have to burn on the mizbeach. This is Rabbi Yossi's opinion. It says the Gemara of the Rabbanan that are arguing with Rabbi Yossi. What do the Rabbanan hold? So you would think that maybe the Rabbanan hold they disagree with this entire concept that there's no pigul when it's one matter and another matter that are not connected to each other. But the Gemara says no, the Rabbanan actually agree to this concept in principle, but not in this case. When do I say this principle? That if you're having a machshava of pigul with one matter in relation to another matter that's sort of disconnected, it's a different thing. Hanamili, when is this? When this is not something that is placed into one vessel. But if it's two parts, true, they're not dependent on each other. You could burn each one separately on the mizbech when you want, but it's all placed into the same vessel. It's considered to be like one carbon, and therefore the machshava of pigul will take effect. So, in what case is it that the Rabbanan would say this rule that the machshava of pigul of one matter on the other matter will not take effect? So, over here in the parentheses, you have the example. This is in a Mishnah later, where it says, "Gabi shachat echad min hakvasim lechel mechaver lemacha da'omret shneim kshedim." Shneim kshedim, it says here. Over here, this is a Mishnah later. What is this referring to? To the two lambs that are brought on Shavuos. Together with the shtei alechem, there are two kvasim, there are two different karbanis. So over here, these are two completely different animals. Right, so they're both part of this carbon, these two karbanis, kvasim that are brought together with the shtei alechem, but it's two different animals. Over here, these are considered to be two different matirim. If when he's shechting one, he has the machshave that he's going to eat from the meat of the other keves, from the other lamb, out of its time. So then these are two matirim that are not going to passel. It's not going to create the halacha of pigul. But in the korban mincha, where they both go into the same bowl, even though you could be makta the kaimitz when you want and the levina when you want, but nevertheless, the chacham say it's in the same bowl, it's going to become pigul. Omer Rav Yanai, so we spoke here about the levina. So Rav Yanai says, likut levina bizar, if the levina was collected by a zar. Right, so what has to be done is you take the kaimetz, the levina is pushed aside, and then the levina has to be collected off the top of the bowl of the flour, and then the kohen collects it and takes it into his hands and brings it to the mizbech and burns it on the mizbech. So what's if a zar did this? The zar collected this levina and put it into the hands of the kohen. So this will passel the carbon. My time, what's the reason for this? Is this a significant avodah that if you have the machshava of pigul, this could passel the carbon? So Rabbi Yirmiyah says yes, because mishum haylacha nagaba, because collecting the levina and placing it into the hands of the kohen is a step of haylacha. It's a step of bringing it closer to the mizbeach, and that haylacha is one of the steps of the avodah by a mincha that the machshava of pigul would passel. And Kasavar, the Gemara explains that Rabbi Yanai holds halacha shaloi beregel shmoy halacha. That halacha doesn't only mean when you're actually taking a step, moving with your feet, even without moving, but over here, by doing this act of removing the levina and giving it to the kohen, that's also considered to be a part of the halacha, and therefore it'll pass when you have a machshava of pigul. Then we had this in the Gemara in Zvachim. It's actually a machlokes whether halacha without walking is considered to be part of the halacha or not, but he holds that it is, and therefore it'll pass. Halacha bizar psula. Rav Mari said of Mari. So here it's talking about zar actually, right? It's talking about when the zar did this, not only about the machshava of pigul, right? That when the zar does this kind of aveda, it'll passel it. Rav Mari said. Rav Mari says, "Afana nami tanine." I can prove you this idea from a Mishnah that we had before, where the Mishnah listed the different avedas that are done by the mincha, where the machshava of pigul would passel, and it said, "Zeh klal." The rule here is kol hakaimitz. The first is the kaimitz. You take the flour in the kaimitz, and then v'noisim bekeli. The second aveda is you place it into another vessel. Then v'hamoilech when you're delivering it to the mizbeach, and then v'hamakter when you're burning it on the mizbeach. Those are the four steps of the aveda of the mincha, and the machshava of pigul by any of them would passel. So the Gemara says, let's now understand what these four avedas are and why are all four of them significant that machshava of pigul will passel. Bishleim kaimetz. The reason why the kaimetz is significant. Haina sheichet. This is in the place of shchita. So Rashi says what happens by shchita is you shech the animal, the blood comes out, so that now separates the blood of the rest of the body of the animal, that the blood will be sprayed on the mizbeach, and then in the rest of the body of the animal, there's the meat that the kohen will eat from it. It's the same thing that you're doing by the kmitza. You're separating the flour, which is going to go on the mizbeach, and the rest of the flour, the shirayim, that the kohen will eat. Mailach, hainu mailach, then delivering it to the mizbeach by the mincha is the same by the carbon when you bring the blood to the mizbeach. And makter, when you burn the kaimitz on the mizbeach, hainu zayre. That actually corresponds to the zrike, not the burning of a carbon, but the zrika of the blood on the mizbeach. When you burn the kaimitz, that's what it corresponds to. But there was another avodah that it says here. When you place the kaimitz into a vessel, my kovid, what is he doing here that it's considered to be significant that if you have the machshava of pigula with pasel? If you would say that placing the kaimitz into another vessel is similar to receiving the blood in a vessel, the Kabbalah Sadam is also an avodah that the Kayin does, that the machshava of pigul with pasel. Rashi brings a pasuk, v'kirivo b'nei Aaron hakayinim. That pasuk goes on the Hilochem, but it also goes on the Kabbalah of the Dam. But midami, how can you compare placing the kaimitz into a vessel and receiving the blood in the vessel? It happens in a different way. By the case of the blood, so you place the bowl there and the blood splashes out from the body of the animal into the vessel. But hacha kashakil, over here the kain is kashakil v'rami, over here the kain is taking the kaimitz and he's throwing it into this new vessel. So it's different, it doesn't compare. So why are we saying that by the placing of the kaimitz into the keli, the machshava of pigul would passel it? So don't you think the pshat over here is mishum de kivin de loy sagile de loy avid law? Even though it's not the same in the act how it happens to the Kabbalah, but nevertheless this is a step in the carbon of the mincha that it must be done. So avodah chshuvi, it's chashuv, it's a significant avodah, even though there's nothing corresponding similar to it by the carbon of a behemoth, but still it's a step that must be done, so therefore it has significance. So like a Kabbalah, so therefore we consider it to be like Kabbalah, even though it's not exactly the same. So regarding removing the levaina from the top of the bowl and giving it to the kayin, since this is a step that must be done, chashuvihi, and so therefore this also has significance, and therefore it can be part of the category of haylacha, that if a zar will do this, it'll be puzzle. That's the proof that we see from the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Loi, this is not necessarily a proof. La'ilam, really I can tell you, the dami lekabbalah, that placing the kaimitz into a bowl, the reason why over there the machshava of pigul will passel is because this is Kabbalah. And not only because it's something which is significant, it's a step that must be done. But this is actually the Kabbalah. V'dekashilach, I had a question, it's not exactly the same. Hosam and Mele, that over there, it's something that is happening on its own. And Hachar kashakal v'rami, and over here he's actually taking and throwing it into the vessel. So how could you compare? So the Gemara says that minor difference doesn't matter. Mechti, let's see, Tarvayu kedushas kelihu. In both cases, what you're doing is you're sanctifying something into a vessel, whether the blood or the kaimitz. Mali memele, what difference does it make if you're sanctifying the blood in the vessel by placing the vessel there and the blood flows into the vessel? And mali kashakal v'rami. And what difference does it make if you're throwing it into the vessel? It's the same thing. So therefore, it's part of the Kabbalah, and that's why the machshava of pigul will passel there. But over here, regarding removing the levaina and giving it to the kayin, where there's no specific step in this Aveda that we could compare to a regular behemoth, who says that this is something significant, that if a zar does it, it'll be possible. Okay, but the halacha, it's no raya from the Mishnah, but the halacha actually remains, like it said before, that if you do this, it will passel. That's how the halacha, and I mentioned before that what this means is, it means that you remove the levaina and you gave it to the kayin. But the Rambam actually paskins that the psul will be when you removed it, even if you did not give it to the kain. Just removing the levaina in itself, that is going to passel the carbon if it was done by a zar.